A World at War 1914 to 1918. The First World War was a global conflict. It started in 1914 and lasted for 4 long years. Millions of soldiers fought on battlefields across Europe. New technologies like machine guns and poison gas made the war incredibly deadly. Civilians also suffered. Food shortages and disease were common. The world desperately needed peace. The road to Compiègne: Exhaustion and Unrest. By 1918, all sides in the war were exhausted. Germany, Austria-Hungary and their allies had fought hard. However, they were running out of soldiers and supplies. The entry of the United States into the war in 1917 gave the Allied powers a boost. Morale was low on all sides. People wanted the fighting to stop. Negotiations and agreement. The armistice is signed. In early November 1918, the world was on the brink of a significant change. The Great War, which had ravaged Europe and beyond for 4 long years, was nearing its end. The relentless battles, the loss of millions of lives and the widespread destruction had taken a toll on all the nations involved. Germany, recognizing the futility of continuing the conflict, reached out to the Allies. They wanted to negotiate an end to the fighting. The talks took place in a railway carriage in Compiègne, France, a location chosen for its neutrality and seclusion. This setting would become iconic in the annals of history. The Allied leaders, including French Marshal Ferdinand Foch and British Admiral Rosslyn Wemyss, were determined to ensure that the terms of the armistice would prevent any future aggression from Germany. They approached the negotiations with a mix of caution and resolve, understanding the gravity of the moment. The German delegation, on the other hand, was desperate to bring an end to the suffering of their people and the collapse of their nation. After days of difficult talks filled with intense discussions and numerous drafts of the agreement, an agreement was finally reached. The armistice was signed, marking the end of hostilities on the Western Front and paving the way for peace. This momentous event would forever be remembered as a turning point in world history. Section 4, November 11, 1918. A day for the history books. This date marks a pivotal moment in world history, a day that would be remembered for generations to come. The world had been engulfed in the Great War for over 4 years, and the end was finally in sight. The Armistice of Compiègne was signed on November 11, 1918, at 5 o'clock in the morning. This agreement between the Allies and Germany brought an end to the hostilities on the Western Front, effectively ceasing the bloodshed that had claimed millions of lives. It went into effect at 11 o'clock in the morning, the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month. This precise timing was symbolic, marking a moment of unity and hope for a war-weary world. News of the armistice spread quickly. Newspapers rushed to print the headlines, and telegraph operators worked tirelessly to relay the message across continents. The world was eager to hear that the nightmare was finally over. Church bells rang out across Europe. In cities and villages, the sound of bells filled the air, a joyous cacophony that signaled the end of the war. It was a moment of collective relief and celebration. People danced in the streets. From Paris to London and beyond, spontaneous celebrations erupted. Flags were waved, songs were sung, and strangers embraced each other in shared joy. The war to end all wars was over. Soldiers began to return home, greeted as heroes. The world hoped that this armistice would usher in a new era of peace and prosperity, a hope that would shape the future of nations. Section 5. Remembering the Armistice Lessons for a New Century. The Armistice of Compiègne marked the end of World War I. It was signed on November 11, 1918, bringing an end to 4 years of brutal conflict that had engulfed much of the world. The signing took place in a railway carriage in the forest of Compiègne in France, symbolizing a moment of hope and a new beginning. It was a day of immense relief and joy. Across the globe, people took to the streets to celebrate the end of the war. Soldiers embraced, civilians cheered, and there was a collective sigh of relief as the guns fell silent. The world had been forever changed, but for a moment, there was hope and unity. The world had paid a terrible price. Millions had died and countless others were wounded or forever scarred by the horrors of war. The landscapes of Europe were devastated, with trenches and battlefields serving as grim reminders of the conflict's brutality. The human cost was unimaginable, and the scars ran deep. The armistice was a reminder of the importance of peace. It underscored the need for nations to come together and resolve their differences through dialogue and diplomacy rather than through violence and war. The The world had seen the devastating consequences of conflict, and the armistice served as a beacon of hope for a more peaceful future. It is a day to remember the sacrifices made by those who fought and died in the war. Their bravery and selflessness ensured the freedoms we enjoy today. Families and communities come together to honor their memory, laying wreaths and paying their respects at war memorials and cemeteries. It is a solemn reminder of the cost of war. We must never forget the lessons of the past. The armistice teaches us the value of peace and the importance of remembering history to avoid repeating its mistakes. Veterans and survivors remind us of the resilience of the human spirit and the need to strive for a better world. We must strive for a future free from conflict and war. By learning from the past and working together, we can build a world where peace and unity prevail. It is our responsibility to ensure that the sacrifices of those who came before us were not in vain, and to create a legacy of harmony for future generations.